I had been through so many pieces of the program that I thought that I was pretty far along. I thought, oh, I'll be one of Brian's advanced students or something. But having it all together into a condensed, extended period, especially the on-site, sessions, those were absolutely fantastic. And not just the content, but the lunches and the sidebar conversations and people just letting their guard down and being themselves. It was amazing. So I think that extended, engagement with the entire program was really the transformational factor. It wasn't an HR workshop taught by HR people who aren't in leadership positions saying, hey, if you're talking to an employee who's a millennial, consider these things. Because that's like an idea. It's not really a behavior. You're not practicing building in that behavior. And again, that extended time of all of that together built in this kind of metacognitive thing where I'm now thinking, even when I'm speaking in meetings or we're having a leadership moment, I'm thinking about the lessons. I'm thinking about, okay, what would this person from my cohort advise me to do? Or, what would a CIO do in this particular case? Or what is the right answer to this? Not just the easy answer or the quick answer. Like, what is the right thing to do in this case? So the extended period of engagement really enabled that behavior to sink in and become that new neural pathway. That was one of the takeaway lessons of videos about learning how to ride a bike differently and unlearning what what got you here won't get you there. All of those things kind of tied together, and you can't just do that in disconnected one-off workshops. You really have to engage in the behavior and the discussion and the activities. So anyway, just the length and the intensity of the program, I think, was great. And then again, this is part of the science of learning is the repeated interaction. So it's not just the sessions and then you go away and do nothing and then another session. There was the coaching meetings, the accountability, the reflections. As much as I had time to do those, there should be something that you're doing every day or two. The Tuesday readings, the constant reminders that this is something you should be paying attention to. And eventually your brain with those extended exposures is like, oh, wait a minute, I need to take this seriously. If I think of myself compared to some of the other participants, I was ready and anticipating the program for a decade. So, mentally, I was prepared to jump in with both feet and say, I'm just going to be open to whatever they say. I'm going to be open to all the feedback. I'm not going to take it without processing it. Like you still have to say, well, is that tool right for me? Is that approach right for me? Would I be fighting myself in order to act in a certain way? Or would that be a natural thing? And but I was ready. So I think when we're talking about, what would make the program more impactful for some other people is just to make sure that they are ready, that they understand that this is a major commitment and that they'll be challenged and pushed. I think writing the letter was the first part of that process for me. But I wonder if that intake process should be maybe a little bit, more in depth, or their leader should just make sure, like, hey, make sure that the people applying to this program meet the following criteria, that they're open to this kind of feedback and they're in the right mental space to participate.
I would call my experience a game changer. I think that, and I think that was below transformational, if I remember correctly. I think any gap there was really kind of had to do with the amount that I put into it. I think the tools were there and available, but that's still a huge thing for me and a great leap forward. And it couldn't have been more timely for me in my leadership journey. I think, the tools that it put in my hands and the practices, whether it's leading, managing, doing, the strategic planning approach and the template that we have been using, thinking about intentionality on presence, leadership as a stage and the roles, all those different things. So it put all those things in my hands. And then I think a key to it, the most important part of the program for me, it reinforced them through a structure that clearly incorporated facts about our human psychology and knowledge about how leaders and their busy lives work, to the point it structured in that way to the point where I have developed new habits and I have the ability to kind of reinforce those and grow them. It also gave me the space and the context to really effectively reflect the times coming together, for three days away, and the structured practices of reflection, so that I could really get more value out of the experiences I'm having. Right? I mean, we're often caught up in the whirlwind, and so just coming apart for that time was tremendously valuable.
And the terminology you've used to describe some of it is game changing. When I look at my own individual growth, I see the impacts of that program day to day and how I approach my work, how I think about my work, how I think about how I invest in my team. And I see the change in them because I'm investing in them differently as well. But in seeing my direct reports as a team of leaders and thinking about them as leaders in the organization and being able to step back and give them more space to take that leadership role, was a big change this year. And that was part of what I've spent quite a bit of time with Laura on in our coaching, in thinking about how I delegate differently, not to just get tasks done, but also some of those leadership activities. And letting them step into their leadership space in the organization, which then has given me the ability to operate at a different leadership level as I think about strategically where we need to go over the next 5 to 10 years. People commented, in my organization at how different I was coming out of that program and at that time. And so that really was, even though it was a different experience than the Advanced Leaders Program, it was a very powerful experience for me.
If there were 2 or 3 things that really had an impact for you back then, earlier on, what would you point to as what people might have seen changed in you when you came back from the MOR Ivy program?
The concept of leading, managing, and doing is a really powerful concept. And even though I had been working in a leadership role for at least 10 years at that point, I considered myself a manager. And a lot of the frame of how I approached my work, how I approached collaboration across the organization was as a manager, not as a leader. And a big component of that program was I redefined myself and my role in the organization and recognized what I should be doing rather than what I had been doing. Practical components of the program that helped me were things like the 4 I's, things that I struggled with and had gotten feedback on in performance reviews, other 360s, that I understood people wanted me to do something differently in terms of how I built relationships or how I collaborated with people, but I didn't know practically how to change it. And so having those tools and having a way to apply them, and then you give a really great space, and it's one of the notes I made for the Advanced Leaders Program as well, you give a really great space for experimenting with those things before I have to try them out in real time and have the perception of the organization, the perception of the person I'm engaging with at my organization influence how we work together going forward. So those were 2 really, really big components for me coming out of the first cohort.
Again, I just want to give kudos for the thoughtfulness of the design as a whole, even kind of teasing it out in those ways, and then for being intentional about both of those pieces. I would say, or all of those pieces, not both of those pieces. I would say for me that the 2 elements, components of it, or tracks, I think on the individual development track, the coaching was just tremendously valuable for me, working with you, Brian, and being able to have the coach's insights, the ability to be a sounding board around a variety of concerns, especially kind of in my role as a newer CIO in a new position. It was just enormously valuable. The cadence of that engagement served as a reinforcement mechanism for all the things that were going on. It helped me to personalize the application of the materials and the practices. I was able to have an external experienced, eye to help kind of evaluate and give me feedback on things that are going on in my world and challenges I was dealing with. And yeah, like I think I already said, it was one of the key things that helped hold me accountable for engaging with the materials and in the practices as we, as inevitably coming out of the on-site events, you get sucked back into the whirlwind. So that really helped drive home and incorporate the learning. And then the second piece was really the community track. I think the intentionality around building those relationships, whether it was through the learning teams or the accountability triads, the other kind of components, and the way we shifted things up to make sure that we built relationships, the non workshop times and the engagements around meals and other different pieces like that enabled us to actually kind of seal friendships, across that. It helped. I was exposed through that to in a deeper way to fantastic leaders from around the country, which I in my normal practices I would otherwise not have been. I'm not. It's an area of growth for me, but I'm not the most intentional leader about getting out there and engaging across in that way. And I don't know that I would have been exposed to it. I've already begun leveraging those relationships, both to improve my leadership and also to benefit my institution. And it's also really motivated me, seeing leaders that I can relate to and who, while they're very talented, I can see myself as a peer to, engaged in various different practices in the broader community. And both of those elements were tremendous, I thought.
So I have two things that I really thought through based on what I felt really helped me in my engagement in the program and how I would work through that. And I'm going to go in a little bit more detail in the next question, but the connections that we build are thoughtful in terms of how the program is set up. So the way we start out to meet people, the way we grow through it, and the way that we develop a deeply rooted friendship with those connections really matter. And so what I said to my team here at Duquesne that actually came through this, and I said, listen, the way I anticipate this is that the first program that we go to is going to be an opportunity to get the feel and meet everyone and understand where they're coming from. By the time we get together a second time, we're going to build some bonds and connections and get to really meet people in a different way. And by the third one, we're going to be deeply rooted together and we're going to have a very close colleague and connection. And so for me, I think that the 8-month program that you set up to basically allow us to interact with people in different ways from the way the accountability teams are, the learning teams are, and then obviously how we break down in the different conversations and groups over time, give me the opportunity to build a connection that I would never be able to get any other way without a program like this in place. And those connections are really the component that's going to help drive my leadership development in the future. Because the opportunity at the top is lonely. There's not a whole lot of people you could turn to, particularly in your own institution, to talk about things of concern to you, because they don't understand the world that we live in the same way as our colleagues across the institutions who are coming across the similar challenges. I keep on my desk, Brian, this name tag, and I every time I've come home from the MOR leadership program, I keep it on my desk and I keep it with the back turned to me. So the name's facing out, because it reminds me all the time to think about some of the critical components of the content that I've learned and to reflect on that and to think about where and how that might apply to me on a regular basis. So obviously, I've thought more about my executive presence and what that means for us and how I interact with people on campus. We actually had a conversation yesterday with my boss, the CIO, about feedback. And he was talking about feedback, and I said, well, you missed something. And he said, well, what did I miss? He said, well, I said, you didn't ask us if we were willing to accept feedback.
I had started a new role in December, and this program, I believe, started in March. And so for me, it gave me the opportunity to really assess, okay, what brought me here, but what's going to move me in this role. I'd worked for a fairly large system at Illinois before, but nothing quite like UC. And so really kind of taking the time to focus on my own development and really see, okay, what do I need to hone in this role? What are the strengths that I bring in? But more so maybe, what is this role going to take that maybe I need to work on and practice? And it was especially gratifying being able to do that with peers. So being able to sit around a learning team, and my learning team really clicked. And so we were able to give really positive feedback about, what are the things that we see that you bring to the table, but then also give some good feed forward about, maybe here's the things that I see that, you could continue to work on or that you can continue to hone.
I frankly got a lot out of the accountability partners as well.
Okay.
You know, my triad there, I think I'll be friends with them for life. You know, because we really talked about our families, our lives, our jobs. We shared things with each other that I couldn't share with my work peers because, you know, if you have a criticism of your boss or the university or a policy or something, it's hard to share that honestly without there being repercussions.
Sure.
But, you know, two people from Boston who you know, don't work at the same place and have external perspectives. It was just amazing to be able to let yourself relax like that. And again, a workshop on campus about leadership, you wouldn't have that opportunity because everybody's from the same university. You know, everybody has the same perspective. Everybody might turn that around and get you with it. There's too much politics involved for you to really relax your guard and say what's really on your mind.
The things that really resonated for me or really helped move me forward from an impact perspective and the design of the program, one is I put down the coaching. For me, that I work best in a one-on-one setting in terms of digging into something, processing something, thinking through. The group settings are harder for me to engage in. And so while I did engage in them and got value out of them, just my personal style, the coaching was incredibly helpful for me. And so having that as an option, having the variability of options was important so that I could find the one that worked best for how I process information. And then I just think that the pairing of my coach, Laura, was a great fit for me in terms of communication style and how we work together. And I know that can make a big difference in terms of that coaching experience. The second piece is that you have the act of reflection layered throughout the whole program. And to me, that's a game changer. If you don't stop to think about what you've learned, how you've applied it, building that self-awareness of what is working for you and not working for you, which then leads into the accountability piece. I think that underlying, and it's something I took away from the first cohort and I've continued to use over the years, but I think that is such a powerful underscore through the whole program because a lot of people don't stop to reflect, and I didn't before the first cohort. So I think that's been one of the most powerful things I've taken away.
One thing that I liked about our interactions is that, and maybe this is a talent that you have as a coach, is to see through the BS and get right to the heart of the matter. So like identifying that thing over there that you're talking about is maybe a distraction from what you actually need to do, or just even ask me the right question to have me reframe my thoughts in a different way. And then we got to practice that with other people. And I thought that was really valuable because one of the reasons I'm in education is I like teaching and learning and coaching and seeing people that I'm working with grow as well. So I got coaching from you. I coach myself, you know, with the same kind of, what would Brian ask me in this case? What would the lessons tell me? And then I coach others with the same way. So it's like there's a 360 going on there as well, with the same kind of coaching mentality.
Certainly for me, it was timely and sense of how I engaged my coach, which, you know, obviously was Sue. As you guys are probably well aware, we started osteopathic medicine college at the same time. It's something that they had already had in place. And actually, we bought a tremendous amount of the technology that Case Western developed. And so not only was it great from a leadership perspective, but I got to ask practical experience of like, how do you work with a physician and a dean of a college of medicine? And how do you approach, you know, what that's going to look like in the future? And how do you manage expectations over time about what they're going to want to do versus what the university could do? And I really got to learn quite a bit from her experience and how she worked in building and collaborating with a college of medicine. And really, we had a tremendous launch of our college of medicine because of the 8 months I got to engage with her and talk about how to do that. And we were just really rocked it. And I owe a lot of it to her and the collaboration she gave me in terms of helping to coach me through that. But beyond that, obviously coaching me on my new role and the opportunities to basically grow as a leader. She had known for some time that this leadership role change was going to happen for me. And so she gave me some pointers about how to approach that and how to approach my new reports, particularly as they're going through more with me. But also in terms of helping me to understand how to think differently about my time, my schedule, my interactions, and things I need to do differently. And I think that's what you're trying to do in the MOR program, is to help us think differently about challenges. And they're not all IT challenges. They're business challenges that IT needs to help solve. And I like the idea of having different perspectives from across the institution to come and talk to us about how we as IT advanced leaders can help them solve complex problems.
In the past, I would have focused on how do I make the project plan? How do I get towards implementation? How do I get the buy-off, the sign-off to get the funding so that we can just move forward? And as these different circumstances happened at the university, I would have been very just focused on continuing to drive forward. The 3 lenses has really helped me step back and think about, oh, as the environment around me is changing, the politics are changing. There's impacts to what people are willing to do, to commit to, as things keep changing, the landscape keeps changing around us. And it's helped me reframe, both for my AVP and our vice president, different approaches to conversations in order to onboard different leadership, as leadership has continued to change over the 12 months. And that's both the president, that's at the dean level, it's at a couple of different levels in the organization. And just frame the strategic opportunity differently. How to tell that story of not only we've got 20-year-old systems and that's a problem, but more of there's a whole missed opportunity in the fundraising space. And how do we take advantage of propelling the organization forward and innovating on how we fundraise and engage alumni so that we can actually increase our revenue, trying to tie it back to that mission and what we want to do, rather than focusing on the technical components of what we're trying to achieve. So I guess that's wrapping together the lenses and the storytelling to really set up myself and my leadership to have different conversations.
I think the workbook, it will be an enormously valuable resource. Following up it, I think there are probably ways it could be made more valuable as a standalone resource that people continue to leverage. There's a little bit of scaffolding, I think, that could be built around it. I think the material works in the context of the seminars. I mean, I think it's accessible and we can be reminded, but even ways that it could be used to kind of, building in exercises, post exercises afterwards that people have the opportunity to complete that have a little bit more structure around them might be helpful in that regard. This may be there and I just missed it. I think even emphasizing on the accountability groups, we did not engage with each other. It might have to been how busy we all are in our life circumstances, but even kind of building that more in throughout. And certainly if there are people I can follow up with more. So more accountability for the accountability groups. And I get we're a cohort of leaders, but that might even be a thing in terms of the coaching, maybe having even a bit more check-in on some of those pieces. We definitely did that. And again, I hold myself 90% accountable for not having done that, but I think you could potentially build in a little bit of structure there. And this part, since my entry to the program was a bit unique in this regard, I don't know if there's an accountability structure built in with the sponsors. Obviously we have the end prep, but I don't know if there's an opportunity for sponsors to kind of understand that would actually be a reinforcement mechanism, which to me, again, it's a leadership program and I get leaders have to be responsible. All the program is designed about the concept of reinforcement mechanisms. So any other ways we can build those in, I think would be beneficial.
I will say there are a lot of places where your program is very accessible for people. The reality is that you probably already have quite a few neurodiverse people in your program as leaders. Even if they are not open about being neurodiverse, And there's a lot in the program that is focused on building a diverse and inclusive environment, but not necessarily operating as a leader when you're part of one of those groups. Most of the expectations for leadership are framed through neurotypical definitions, and the expectations and cultures and organizations actually make it harder for those people. We do a lot more adapting to meet other people's standards. In some cases, we can't even say at our employer that we are neurodiverse because we know the bias level is so high. Which that's the case I'm in. I would never say anything at work about that. And I think you're going to see more and more of that as we see more openness in younger generations, more people being diagnosed. And you're going to have different leaders coming up through the program who are going to be much more open about it and having a plan for creating a different space for them to engage in that program. And there's a lot more going on of people feeling like they shouldn't have to adapt. And how does that change how we think about leadership and what leadership looks like? And I think that's a space for the program to think ahead. Where does this need to go?
I think this cohort was really unique in the sense that the UC central system sent the direct reports for the CIO, and the California State University system did the same thing. And so we were able to really work with our peer system in a lot of different ways and talk about things that were impacting both universities, or even maybe some things that we were doing well that they maybe were working on. And so I think that in itself is going to pay off in tenfold. We've already talked this year about bringing all of our CIOs together, so we'd have upwards of 40 CIOs in a room from the California systems. Our leadership teams are going to start meeting. Both CIOs from the California state system and the UC system are working on strategic plans, and so we've been able to already hone in on kind of what are you all seeing, what are we seeing, how are we getting to your end result. So I feel like that in itself has been quite amazing.
What you've given me personally as a wealth of content that I could draw upon continuously. And what I typically do, and something we've done here, is I actually take snippets of that content and I bring it back to my management team and my other staff, and I actually bring it back and let them learn from our opportunities.
I just have been so grateful for both times I've been through the cohort, and I think the advanced leadership one has been so meaningful for me, both because of the people and because of what I've taken away from it, and how I've been able to build more confidence in myself. I would never have said anything about neurodiversity before this, but it has also spurred me, that whole do the right thing as a leader, of starting to have a voice and speaking up differently. And I think that's another thing that ripples in different ways outside of the workplace. And so I think that's a very powerful thing as part of this program too.
It's a fantastic program. I'm sure I'm not the first one. You've turned me into a bit of a more evangelist, and so I I expect I'll be both individually and collectively driving some more business your way. I think it's a fantastic thing that you built. I'm very grateful to have been exposed to it, it's looking forward to continue to be engaged in the community.